Third declension nouns with stems ending in rho. You can follow along in Athenaze chapter 8 beta, pages 124 to 125. For our example, we'll be using the noun mater matros, which means mother. You'll notice in the nominative singular that it ends in eta rho. The original stem for this word is actually mater with ending in epsilon rho. So let's write out that original stem in all the slots and add our endings that we know and love for the third declension. Now let's look and see what happens in individual cases. So for the nominative singular, the S disappears, and to compensate somehow for the loss of that final sigma, that epsilon is lengthened to an eta, giving us what you see in the dictionary entry, mater ending in eta rho. For the genitive and dative singular, these are what we call the weak cases. And weak cases means you put the accent on the final syllable. That means that second to last syllable, epsilon rho, is unstressed. And because it's unstressed, that epsilon over time just sort of drops out of existence. So meteros becomes metros, and meteri becomes metri. The remaining cases in the singular are strong cases, which means the accent is on the stem itself. And in the strong cases, that epsilon sticks around. So you get metera and mater for the accusative and vocative. In the plural, only the dative plural is weak. And again, like the genitive and dative singular, that epsilon gets swallowed up because it's an unstressed syllable. But then you get metrosi, which is hard to say. So to make it easier to say, we shove in an alpha, and we get metrasi. The remaining cases are all strong, which means the accent falls on the stem itself, and that epsilon does not disappear. In fact, it holds the accent, and everything appears as it would seem. So now that you know how you got to all of these forms, if you look back at the purple in the forms, it'll look like there are 4 different stems. So mater in the nominative singular looks like one stem ending in eta rho. But then the genitive and dative looks like there's a second stem, matra, ending in tau rho. In most of the cases, it looks like the stem is mater ending in epsilon rho, and that in fact is the original stem. But finally, if you look at the dative plural, it looks like matra is yet a 4th stem. So that's why it looks like there's 4 stems. Now you understand where they came from, how they all originally go back to the same true stem. But if you want to memorize these forms, just memorize that the genitive and dative singular use the second stem, and the dative plural uses that 4th stem. Finally, let's look at a couple of these so-called irregular third declension nouns ending in rho. The first one is hacher heros, which means hand. For this one, the original stem was actually chesra, which is incredibly hard to say, and for that reason, it changes everywhere. Most of the time, it changes to cher, and that's everywhere but the dative plural. So we're writing out, we get cher in all of the forms, then we get to the dative plural. That one, the original stem was chesra plus the ending c. That's still ridiculously hard to say, so they lop out the s and get simply chersi. Then the final 2 forms use the cher, chi, epsilon, iota, rho stem like the previous ones. So the only difference here is that in the dative plural, there is no iota in the stem. The second irregular one is haguna gunaikos, which means woman. The stem for this one is gunaik. You see it in most places. When we get to the dative plural, gunaik plus the ending c, as you've seen before, kappa plus sigma becomes a xi, giving us gunaiksi. but then the accusative and vocative plural are exactly as you would expect. The only two irregular forms are the nominative singular, which is simply hagune, and the vocative singular, which started out as the pure stem gunaik, but the kappa drops off over time and leaves us with simply gunai. The end.